Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us to join this conversation. And I am so pleased to say that we've got with us the director, Carla Gutiérrez. Please join me in giving her another round of applause.
Perfect. Thank you.
Carla, thank you so much for joining us. And just to say, we've got a full house here
I can hear
in
them. Thank
London.
you so
Yeah,
much.
nice. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing the film with us and for being here to speak with us this evening. And just to start by saying a huge congratulations on the success of Frida so far. Obviously won an award at Sundance around kind of this time last year,
hmm
and just a couple of weeks ago was shortlisted for the Oscars. Obviously, absolutely, that deserves a round of applause, doesn't it? Yeah. So yeah, just huge congratulations. And I'm going to ask a few questions and then I'm absolutely going to open it up. So please be thinking about what you'd like to ask of Carla. But I just want to start by asking, Frida Kahlo's story has been told many times in many ways. In books, in documentaries, in a sort of fictional adaptation of her life. And there's something really, really different about this film in terms of your approach. I think I was saying in the introduction that I wonder if it's the first film we've seen about Frida Kahlo's life told in Frida Kahlo's own words and in her own language, in her own mother tongue.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just want to start by asking about what it was that was kind of important to you about that approach and what it was that you knew you could bring to this film that would set it apart from the other kind of tellings of Frida's life and work.
It was really the approach, the idea of giving her the stage to, to be able to tell her own story, to hear her voice in a very intimate and get really close to her as if you were listening to the secrets of a friend. It was that idea that, you know, for me, that's why we needed to tell this story this way, because I hadn't seen, you know, Frida's voice really kind of like take over her own telling of her own life. And I really wanted to give Spurs space for her own voice to really like take over. And she really did. At the beginning, I knew that there were enough writings that she had left of her life that she could maybe tell part of her story. But as we were doing the research for the film, we gave her the mic and she kind of like just would not let it go, which was like a beautiful, fantastic, experience of being able to also, for me, connect with her as a normal woman. I mean, the reception of the film has been really special for me because at the end of the day, it is about this symbol. It is about this iconic artist, but it's really the story is really about a woman who decided not to contain her voice, and I think that's what audiences are really responding to, like being able to just to see a woman dealing with things that we all deal with, and then she just gave herself permission to express those feelings incredibly loudly in her art, and also the way that she interacted with the world and with people. So yeah, it was the approach and the idea that told me like, okay, her story has been told so many times, but there's an opportunity to really tell it in a way that feels fresh, unique, and also incredibly intimate.
It really does. And tell us a bit more about your the kind of approach to the archive and the kind of sourcing of these sort of primary materials, her writing and so on, because because of the importance of telling the story in her own words, but also I think that really takes precedent over what we often see, which is other, so-called experts talking about her life. So yeah, you found such a treasure trove of writing and archive materials, and yeah, how did you go about finding it, assembling it, navigating it?
I never wanted to look at her through the eyes of others. I wanted always to be able to hear from her as much as possible. But the stuff of her writings, there's only fragments in books that that I knew existed. There was enough that I knew that she could carry a lot of this story. But then we did some very disciplined, very heavy research and collected all of the writings that she's left us. And the writings are not necessarily published in one place. They're in different houses, in different collections, all around the world, actually. And so being able to read everything. For me, for example, like I just her and was able to like really understand her fragility in a way that I had never really done before. And I'm somebody like many, people around the world that got obsessed with Frida when I was a young woman. I think a lot of us, young women get like kind of like, I mean, she's a really big symbol of female empowerment for us. So I knew a lot of about her life and all the details, but being able to really dive into all the archival that we collected. And I think that we have like the biggest kind of, potentially public database of all her writings. And that was just like a very special experience. And that also guided us not to like tell a story that was only like factual telling of somebody's lives, like what happened to that person, but really have this experience of diving into the pool of her emotions because all of her writings are, how she was reacting to moments in her life in an emotional way, not necessarily telling us what happened in her life. So we just went with that. Like we just follow, what she's left us, which is really, this passionate spirit, and her reactions to her pain, her losses, but also her strength.
And I want to touch on your reference, the kind of emotion behind her writing. And I think one of the things that really stood out for me was that I feel like I really learnt about her as a sexual and sensual person for the first time. Like so much of, I mean, obviously we know about, if we know about Frida, we know about her relationship to Diego Rivera. We know that she had, relationships with other women. She's become a bit of a kind of queer or LGBTQ kind of icon as well. But I think it still really struck me how kind of, yeah, sort of sensual some of her writing is, and the, the letters to her lovers and her partners, and the way that she really talks about that side of herself in a way that maybe we particularly don't see so often, in from people who have disabilities or chronic conditions that she does. I think that's maybe not something that we don't see enough, is sort of disabled bodies or bodies who go through what she goes through, and yet are kind of, sexual beings. I wonder if you could talk a bit about, yeah, like how, yeah, just that kind of side of her and how you brought that out, because I
Yeah,
loved that.
thank you. That was so important for me. And also to really show how she explored her pleasure and desires openly since she was a teenager in a society in a very Catholic society where, we women are told that we should just don't even think about those things. Like when we want to explore ourselves, that's not that's not a nice girl thing to do at that age. And I think we really internalized that. And I just really loved that, as a teenager, she wanted her boyfriend to fuck her. And it was really important to kind of like plant the seed for us that there was, that there was this like need that she responded to explore her own pleasure, physical pleasure, and a sense of desire, that then when we learn about all her lovers, it is also about that, right? It is also about like just responding to the feelings that you get from just being loved, being seen, being sought after, and for her to kind of like just leave us with testimony where like we see, yes, a disabled woman, but also like as she's older is still, looking at people in the hospital and really kind of responding to that desire. We're always sexual beings from the moment that we're young to, I mean, for women when we're older, and a lot of times we don't talk about that. And to me, that was incredibly important. Also because I was raised in the same cultural background. So I really understand kind of like the taboos of really not talking about it and not really, encouraging young women to explore that part of ourselves. So for me, that was a revelation that I really wanted to explore in the film. And gosh, those letters to the lovers were just like, oh, like the way that I mean, there were so many more lines that we could choose from. The way that she explained the experience of sex, and the way that she wrote about it was just really intense and passionate. And we hope that that could be conveyed in the film somehow. So hopefully you guys all felt that. And there, was a tinkling of like, erotic, sensual, something in the audience. So yes, I love her for that. And I have a lot of gratitude for a woman that explores those things so openly, because we all need to do that a lot more.
Absolutely. And you asked if the audience felt it. There are some definite nods. Um, and obviously, I want to come on to talk about Frida's artwork. And um, yeah, your approach to showing that, and the sort of decision making behind that, the kind of wonderfully animating and kind of re-energizing and kind of reframing these works for us on screen. But also perhaps the kind of sense of responsibility that you might have felt in in how you kind of represented those for us.
So, for me, the choice to animate Frida's art was a really early choice. Like it happened at the same moment that, I had the idea to make this film this way, because her art for me is another expression of her voice. We had, her writings, her actual voice, her words, but the paintings, I think, are, really the voice that is so much alive and is still with us after her passing. And so the art was in a way another way that she was narrating her feelings and the way that she was narrating her life. And we never wanted to like, impose like a different kind of intention that she had for those paintings. We had a lot of conversations about what, we believe she intended with those paintings. Obviously, there's paintings that she's talked about. There's a lot of academic work done around the paintings. Obviously you come into a relationship with art where you're also interpreting those paintings as you feel, right? But there was just a lot of conversations about what we thought she felt and all, even the details in all the paintings, like what her meaning, what the meaning behind those details were. So we wanted to create this sense of motion as the story was moving, and for the audience to have this feeling of actually physically diving into the pool of her emotions. Like I always thought about like, okay, that pool is pretty bloody sometimes and it's pretty like thick with like really heavy emotions and very intense passion. But I really wanted the audience to kind of dive into her paintings and live inside of her paintings. Um, like sometimes we do in museums, right? But the cinematic art is a different type of art. it moves in a different rhythm. You're telling a story that is moving forward, and we wanted to be able to like highlight what she meant, the feelings that she had in those paintings, um, through the storytelling that we were embarking on in the film. So yeah, so that was the intention with it, and we, you know, you see them move, but in a way there's a lot of subtlety to it. Like we never bring in any other elements. We never created original art around her paintings. So it's very much all the elements that she used. Again, with that intention to have the audience like maybe get a sense of what she was feeling as she was painting those works of art. So it was a bold decision, but I'm really glad we just went for it.
Yeah, no, me too. I think it's yeah, as you say, it kind of creates like a real sense of kind of immersion.
Hmm.
Um, I think for the audience, but and as you say, you kind of balance that with being faithful to the art in that you didn't bring anything else into it other than that kind of sense of movement. Yeah. I'm gonna open it up at this point. Yes, have we got questions? Okay, we take one at the back and then down there. If so, we're just gonna wait for Mike in with the red jacket. Thank you.
Sincere congratulations, Carla. It was an incredible piece of work, extremely rich. And you might not want to answer my question, but it's kind of in the realm of how you got the film made, the technical aspects, from
Hmm.
conception, when you first had the idea, to the end, how long it took you, and some of the great things about getting it done and the not so great things. Please. Thank you.
So when we got the idea, we started doing some research, my producer and I, to really focus kind of the approach that first seed of an idea, that we had, from the moment I thought of it. Um, and that probably took us about a month to a month and a half, like a lot of reading and writing the treatment. And then there was, taking it out because it's a film that it's, as you see, it's like really heavy archival, there's animation. We needed to find partners to be able to actually make the film, and to get the financial support for it. So once we started production, once we got the partners, the film took about a year and a half to make. So it was an intense process, but also a process where we just assembled like a really great team. So it was like getting like this amazing talent, all of us in a train, and we just like we kept moving. So for a documentary, sometimes when you think about a year and a half, it's actually pretty quick time frame. But I feel that like we just had this just amazing team, and it just kind of like, came together without ever compromising the quality of what we really wanted to make. So that was the experience. And you know, there's always, I mean, I always talk about the process of putting a story together as kind of like a delicious challenge. Like there's a lot of challenges along the way, like from figuring out the story to like licensing some archival. There were like some photographs that I loved that I just couldn't license, but then when we changed them to other photographs, like they actually felt better. So there is with the rights, with the art, it was kind of like a waiting game. We didn't know what was going to happen, and it was really nerve-wracking. So there is a lot of challenges along the way, but I think a lot of that, it's like, to me, is the challenges that like are windows into new discoveries and new possibilities. So it is always delicious. It's like yummy work. Sometimes hard, but it's really, exhilarating.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that, Carla? Did you have to fight at all to be able to make the film in Frida's own language,
It
as
was a
opposed
question
to
that,
making it English language? Yeah.
yeah. It was a question that came up. I think that there were two questions at the beginning. One is that, sometimes people get really nervous about an archival film, especially if you talk to them about like a lot of the footage and most of the photographs are going to be black and white. There's this perception that people have that like that's going to be boring or dull or tired. But I love it. Like there's a way to reinterpret footage and archival that makes it feel so alive and immersive. And I love that challenge. So that was one of the things that we encountered really early on when we were taking the film out at the beginning. Like I think people were getting a little nervous about this story that happened so long ago. And when you are not making a fiction film, it is going to be with archival that feels, from a long time ago. And then the Spanish thing was also, I think, a question. I think we got a lot of no's at the beginning when we were looking for partners because it still feels like people get nervous about, audiences kind of like not grasping or like having control over the story right away, which I find fascinating. Like, I think that if there's mystery and there's a way to bring in audiences that can be like a really, beautiful, active engagement. And I just love, like, that was really important for me. And that's what we were looking for the right partners for the film. I wanted it to always be in Spanish because, besides the fact that like that's just her native language, is our language carries so much of us, the way we express the texture of how we say things in our own native language. That's Frida, right? The way that she swears and the way that you pronounce those things. Like I love swearing in Spanish so much more. It has so much more weight for me than doing it in English. So we never wanted to take that away from her voice. And that it meant that it took us a little longer to be able to find the right partnerships to tell the story the way we wanted to tell it.
I think it just felt so important to feeling so much closer to her. We had a
Yeah.
question here as well. If we could just get the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about the process, whether you went the kind of traditional way of storyboarding, scripting, and then going into production, or whether you actually created the film in the edit, which I think with archival material and animation, that would make a lot of sense to me. And then the second part, I was just going to check whether you took artistic license with moving quotes around to help you tell the story better, or whether you try to be really, really faithful to the timeline of her writings.
That's two really great questions. I'll answer the second one first, and then you might have to remind me of the details of the first one. But um, I mean, there is license in the sense that, for example, she talks about her jealousy towards, and I think that was really important for me to show because a lot of people think that like, oh, she had an open marriage and it was great and everything was fine. But, it's so much more relationships are so much more complicated than that. And we found a letter where she actually talks about how hurt she was, especially, with Diego's attention to other women. And I really wanted to include that jealousy, right? But then you take some license in terms of like that letter was written, many years, later than where we put it. Like those lines come in earlier in their relationship, and it's a letter that she wrote when they were like, farther, like, many, many years into the relationship. But it is, it is a sentiment. It's about emotion, right? And we knew also that those emotions existed for her from the very beginning of her marriage. So in a way, they're kind of like informed decisions that we made, informed licenses that we made. So obviously in the film, we take, lines from different letters, or her, her diary was only written at the very end of her life. So we're taking lines from different times when she wrote them and placing them sometimes at different times during her life in the film. But these are a lot of emotions or thoughts that we knew she had or that are just like, regular emotions that we knew she had in general about that relationship, for example. So those are kind of like the licenses we took, but we were very, we were very also disciplined, like, we were following the way that we were editing the film, and my associate producer was following what line came from what letter. And so we knew where things were coming from, and we did a lot of fact checking at the very end to make sure that we weren't saying anything that we should not be saying, right? Taking her out of context of what she meant. So yeah, so that's how we work with that. And can you remind me the first question again?
Yeah, so I think it was your process and whether or not the film was kind of storyboarded first and kind of all laid out, or whether or not it was more kind of made in the edit. Is that a
Yeah.
faithful? Yeah,
So
just checking that was the question.
So this is my directorial debut. It is the first film that I've directed, but I've actually been a documentary editor for many, many years, a couple of decades actually. And in my experience, the editing in documentaries is the writing of the film. And this is how we approach it for Frida as well. And it was really important for me to understand how much emotion could be conveyed through the visuals that we were choosing, and also the art, and how we were presenting the art. So the writing was simultaneous, right? We were having conversations with my, incredible supervising editor, David Teague. We were having conversations about like, what are the themes that we want to focus on in her life? Like, how are we going to present this passionate, curious, rebellious girl, so that when she has the accident, you really feel her loss, right? So that's part of writing, like that, like how you're deciding for the narrative to flow in terms of like the emotional, themes that you really wanted them to come out. And so all of that to me is part of writing. And then I would jump in and edit with the visuals and see how, all of it together felt in terms of the emotional narrative that we were going for.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that film. Wonderful. I have a question. It's very striking, the symmetry that you have between the paintings and the voice. And when you see the paintings, this incredible insistence on her own primacy and the primacy of her emotions and her feelings and, her frame of experience. And then to hear her voice all the way through, giving with her own voice, just that through. Except that you don't just have her own voice, whereas in the paintings it's really her whole, just her and her view and her wanting to give people her own view of everything. When her voice, although it's almost completely her voice, you do introduce other voices into the film, with other people's quotes, with the lovers and with Diego Rivera, and I was wondering about that choice and whether that was always there from the beginning, or because it really delivers something that otherwise you wouldn't get, but at the same time it slightly compromises the whole thing about just being about her voice. And I was wondering whether you did struggle with that at all, and what made that choice come about.
So actually, when we first started researching, we actually thought that we were gonna need to rely on other people's voices more. The concept was always to have a first person account of her life. So we never wanted to have interviews with experts that that know Frida well because of what they studied, but didn't know her in person. I mean, all the people that surrounded her in her life, have passed away for many, many years. So it was always like the testimony of the people that were there, or the people that had relationships with her, people that loved her, people that saw, were there for like some big moments in her life. For example, the miscarriage, like the description of her friend, of what she saw, with Frida bleeding a lot. we, thank goodness that in the process of research, we discovered that she would also be a much bigger presence, which that's obviously what we wanted. But there were things in her story that we needed. We needed other people's voices to kind of like complete the picture in some places. Um, but we were lucky to find out that we only needed, like, they kind of like took, we kept cutting and cutting and cutting out voices as we were going, which was wonderful. If we could have like just been only with Frida, I think that that would have been like amazing. But there were some things that I felt necessary, to have other people kind of like complement the story, to have like a better understanding of the picture of it. Um, like for example, the moment she doesn't really talk about asking a doctor after her miscarriage for the book of what a fetus would really look like, right? And I think that's something incredibly important in her story. It is actually Diego that says like, no, give her the book, she's going to do something with it, she's going to make some art, which was also a way for us to include the fact that he was very supportive of her for her art, even though they had a very tumultuous relationship. So those were kind of like the decisions that we made. I actually, like, you're making me think, because I'm not quite sure if we have other people's voices when we're seeing her art. But I would need to go back to the film to make sure that like that doesn't happen. That is only her voice when you're seeing her paintings. But I couldn't tell you for sure if that's the case.
Carla, thank you so much. I think if we had more time, I think there's definitely more questions, and I would love to continue this conversation, but I'm afraid I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on, just such an incredible portrait. Thank you. I want to thank you all for showing up this evening in support of Frida. I want to thank Amazon and the team here. I've been Melanie from Reclaim the Frame. We run events, screening events of films by filmmakers of marginalised genders year-round, UK-wide. Please check us out at Reclaim the Frame or reclaimtheframe.org. Thank you so much. And again, Carla, thank you.
Thank you.